Hey everybody, let's get started. Presenters have loaded. Doors closed.
We did not get a blue screen of death on the presenters.
Sigh of relief. So welcome to SLES and Enterprise Apps on the Cloud with a couple different Azure product teams. Some quick introductions. My name is Alfred Sin. I'm a program manager on the Azure Linux Compute team. One of the things I work on is the virtual machine serial console, so I'll be showing you guys that in a little bit in the demo.
And I'm Peter Lopez. I'm a principal program manager in the Azure dedicated team. I work on very large instances, which are basically anything over 8 terabytes of memory or larger. We're talking like the big iron stuff. Small note, if you guys saw Dune, Alfred was in it, used one word to silence all this Harkonnen army. Azure.
Azure. All right, here's what we'll be talking about today. Quick high level. We've got Linux and Azure ecosystem. We'll be chatting a little bit about that. We've got some stuff that we're doing within Azure Compute for SLES, among other Linux distros, so we'll be talking to you guys a little bit about that. And then Pete will share some stories about SAP on Azure, so those will be fun to chat about. So let's dive right into the first section. So you've probably heard some stuff about Linux and open source at Microsoft in the news recently, and a bunch of these things are on the screen now, and let's chat about them one by one. So the first one, you've all probably heard references. Red and blue are now the same color. So next thing you know, there'll be a purple Fedora OS or something, and maybe what's Microsoft's position in all this? What does this mean for the rest of us? For us, it just means we're still looking to be the preferred provider for Linux distros on Azure. We think that Linux should just run on Azure, and just run it's a big statement. But that's if we didn't have that mandate, I probably wouldn't have a job. So that's what we're trying to do. And the interesting thing about, I suppose, Azure and Linux is we're not in this position, this weird convoluted game theory position where we end up competing with our customers. So from that perspective, we have a chance to stand out as a Linux provider. Pete, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, when I look at it, there's a good tweet from SUSE last night talking about they're the largest independent Linux distributor or distribution out there. I think about all of these things when it comes to contributors, right? Because when it comes to Linux, the Linux Foundation, when we look at open source, even at Microsoft, right? I mean, it's great to say you're open source, but what do you bring into the party? Like, who's actually contributing code? Right? And I think when you look at Microsoft and you look at SUSE and you look at our relationship, what we bring for open source and the Linux kernel, and then some of our trepidation about what is IBM really going to do? They're kind of shifty guys. But we know that we're trying to demonstrate our commitment, bring those resources, and we encourage you to help direct us in where we need to go and what we need to invest in. So please, feedback is always welcome, and come see us in the booth and let us know if you don't have an avenue to provide that feedback. We'll get you guys in contact with the right people. Or just send him a note, because I don't do any work. That guy
just
right
overload
there.
this inbox, and maybe that one as well.
Yeah.
Next thing, GitHub acquisition, Citus data acquisition, all these acquisitions. What's Microsoft doing buying up these companies? GitHub, those guys, the Citus data guys, they're people that are very technically strong. They have really serious open source pedigree. And these sort of acquisitions, we view them as allowing them to continue to innovate and contribute to the open source community. I mean, it's really unsettling. It could be unsettling if you see this in the news and you take a step back and you're thinking to yourself, oh, what's the plan going forward? But a couple points I'll bring up. If you look at Kubernetes, right? Everybody's talking about Kubernetes nowadays. It's this grand old project. Google sort of leads that, and we at Microsoft, we at Azure, we're creating a managed service built on top of that. We're contributing upstream to Kubernetes. We want to make that ecosystem thrive, and we want to do something similar for GitHub and whatnot. And then there's Citus data, where from a database perspective, we've got SQL on Linux now, and that's kind of big news. You wouldn't have seen that a number of years ago. And that, I think, with those actions, we just want to demonstrate our commitment to enabling this kind of innovation, and that's sort of where these acquisitions allow us to go. Now that I've mentioned Kubernetes, if you look under your seats, there's a Kubernetes lying around under there.
Everybody gets a Kubernetes cluster. Just sign up at Azure.
There you go. So the point here is, Sure, container stuff. We've got ACI, Azure Container Instances. Containers just run on that, right? You go to any sort of, get a container image off Docker Hub or something, you stick it up into a container instance, it'll just run. But the cool thing here, the somewhat recent piece of news is SUSE Cloud Application Platform. That thing now runs on AKS, which is kind of cool because that'll save you some time, not only during setup when you're trying to stand up a Kubernetes cluster, you can just use a managed AKS cluster. But again, it goes back to the point of Linux should just run on Azure. You have a container, you can stick it on AKS, you can stick it on ACI. It'll be the same thing. It just works, and that's what we're trying to do. One thing that's kind of cool to me actually is this HPC stuff. So we've got some big VM sizes. Pete was talking about 8 terabytes of RAM. These guys come with a couple hundred gigs of RAM. These are HB and HC sizes. We announced them around last October. The HB are optimized for memory bandwidth, HC are optimized for compute. And now we're announcing them with a public preview of RDMA over SRIOV, which is pretty cool stuff considering this is all virtualized. And I guess the best part about all this is SLES is just supported on it. It runs, it just works. So, this is really, really, really cool stuff, especially because it's such a large instance. If you want to do some weather forecasting or something, check out the link. Sign up, spin up an instance, and check it out.
Yeah, I think there's some really interesting work right now going on in HPC, right? So when we look at what ARM is doing into the industry from an automotive and manufacturing perspective, but then we also look at geo-distribution, where IoT is going to start leaning into these areas, both from a security perspective, but also from a fan, gathering more telemetry, more data. You've got a lot more to put together and to actually then produce more results. Machine learning actually plays a big part in this as well, is where we're going with sentiment analysis, as well as when we think about deep learning and other things. We see that specialized ASICs and really HPC is really going to be dedicated down that avenue from a number of perspectives, right? Because it's never going to be all about just CPUs. You need GPUs, but you have to be able to balance really between those two, plus get it off the box and manage the storage. So in a virtualized environment, looking at seasonal spin up, spin down, the ability to rapidly prototype pipelines and everything. These are abilities that we're going to bring, plus flanking with the rest of everything that any public cloud that really is worth their salt. Microsoft's bringing smaller instance, larger instances. We're talking about MV2. We're talking about GPU-driven, memory-driven. So the ability to actually mix and mingle, try different things, figure out where the value is going to be is exceptional. With where we're going.
Another thing is the SLES kernel. We've got an Azure optimized SLES kernel on SLES images running on Azure. So what that means is you get fancy statistics like 25% increased network throughput, 23% reduced network latency, stuff like that. Faster access to Azure features, so like RDMA, SRIOV, like I talked about before. Write accelerator, probably one of your favorite features, Pete, for those MV2 instances. And these come out of the box, right? If you spin up a SLES image from the marketplace, you'll get the kernel, the Azure optimized kernel. But if you want to switch back, it's super easy to do so via zipper. So you can get all these fancy optimizations, or if you don't want it, you can just get out of there. So at a high level, our strategy for Linux on Azure kind of revolves around 3 pillars. We've got choice. So what is choice? The first thing that comes to mind, of course, is choice is about Linux distros, right? We want to make sure that we have whatever you want available in Azure. Choice is about VMs versus containers. However you want to run your code, we'll let you do that. Choice is software-defined everything, right? You get to pick and choose which pieces of software you want to use, whether that's a Microsoft-written piece of software or whether that's another piece of software that just does what you want it to do. You get to pick, and we just make it run. And then choice, we've got support there as well. You get to choose levels of support that you want. We have that collaborative support between SUSE and Azure. People working behind the scenes to make sure that your stuff just works for you. API, CLI tooling. Of course, we've got the Azure CLI that's provides a standard surface across various environments for you to interact with Azure. We've also got cool things like within the Azure Cloud Shell. There's Terraform and Ansible integrated right in there, so you can use those without needing any setup or anything. And then from a hybrid perspective, so there's when you hear about hybrid, the first thing that probably comes to mind is, oh yeah, Azure Stack. So Azure Stack, it allows you to extend your Azure IaaS services. So for example, you can deploy a VM in East US, you can deploy a VM in West Europe, you can deploy a VM in Pete's basement, if you want. Stick an Azure Stack down there and you can deploy something there.
I'll give you prorated prices. Don't worry, guys.
It's cheaper IaaS. If you want PaaS, you can do the same. I can spin up like a web app in Pete's basement if I wanted to, if I had that. And the cool thing about, I'm going to pick on your basement again. The cool thing about Pete's basement, he's probably got Office 365 somewhere lying around, which means he's got an Active Directory set up somewhere, which means he's got a Microsoft account. So it's even easier to just get started with that environment if he chooses that.
So, and actually, I want to add a couple of things on here, right? So I think from the community, we have heard a number of people want more CLI, want more automation, right? And what tools is Microsoft recommending? Not just the tools that we're really talking about, like PowerShell and everything else. I think what you're looking at is when you look at, for instance, the Azure console, right? Looking at native integration with Ansible or Terraform, right? Those are, it doesn't seem like big deals until you actually start to build a pipeline of some sort. Right? And we are actually paying attention to the act of doing and not just us building our own tools in the ivory tower, so to speak. But we're looking at what is driving markets, what's driving business verticals, what's driving security and compliance, what's driving innovation. And I would say you've all heard the message from Microsoft about wanting to be a top innovator. And if anything, our acquisitions, our tooling, the integrations you're seeing at all levels, the collaboration, right? Meaning that it's not just us saying, well, it's Linux, it's not our problem. We actively engage with the vendors, with the distros, and with our customers to go solve those new problems that are coming up as we see new solutions emerging. And all of this is very exciting. It's a great time. It's a turbulent time. But it's good to know that you got friends and that we really want to partner with you guys on those.
So here's a fancy slide that says a bunch of things with a bunch of pretty pictures. You've all probably heard, Azure is nearly 50% Linux at this point. And the takeaway here is, people are using Azure to solve their problems. People are using Azure to innovate. There's communities being built around that. And sort of to what Pete said, we want you guys to be a part of that community. So that's sort of this slide. And going back to the Linux distros that I mentioned earlier, this is kind of table stakes now, where we've got whichever Linux distro you want available in Azure. Of course, there's SUSE, OpenSUSE, we've got SLES lying around there, a bunch of other ones. But at the end of the day, an operating system, it's just a tool. It's a means to an end, right, Pete?
Yeah, I think it's about that blinking light, right? So all of us work in tech. There's logos on the box, but all we care about is that the blinking light is blinking and it's not red, right? And when you look at these, it's about tools, right? When you're looking at it from a cloud perspective, and you have to look at it in a different way from the Microsoft perspective, because we're very software-centric. Like, you all know us for the Microsoft operating system, Microsoft solutions, and everything else, but cloud is still something that we've made tremendous strides in the industry. I mean, obviously, we're number 2, right? So we've come a long way, and we're getting massive. But in the end, that blinking light is what we're concerned about. Now, whether it's a Windows solution or a Windows solution mixed with Linux, again, when we look at where Microsoft has placed investments with even the Windows operating system coming into the Azure group, we're looking at cloudification, right? Optimization of the SUSE kernel, looking at, again, how we're going to optimize with SAP and other solutions, right? This is what we're looking to do, is to get that reach, right? And in fact, if we start looking at mobile operating systems and even more, and you go up the stack into the app, I mean, this list grows and it's exponential, but it's everywhere. In fact, I would dare to say that everybody in this room has something Microsoft some way, shape, or form that you might not even realize. I mean, you might go get in your car, drive away. If it's a Ford, it's running, some Windows operating system. It's a Mercedes. We got some IoT stuff coming back. So, again, it's very interesting to see where Microsoft's reach is, because it's a lot further than people realize these days.
So let's talk about some stuff that we're doing within Azure Compute. There's a few different high-level areas that we'll address. We've got migration configuration, image customization, a couple different implementation considerations, and then some troubleshooting. And then this is kind of the Azure stuff that we're doing to help make that experience better. So the first one is Cloud Init. So Cloud Init, this is something that I suppose our friends across the lake and everyone's favorite search engine are doing. But for whatever reason, Azure is not really. And that's something we're looking to change. Because Cloud Init is awesome. It allows you to provision VMs without an agent. without needing that agent in there to do any configuration. You can do away with your extensions. You can run stuff upon every reboot. And we're working on it for SLES. We've got engineers working on this. We're expecting stuff to happen around the second half of this year. And we're always looking for feedback. So if you want to share your thoughts with us, come see us after the session at the booth, whenever. And we'll be blogging about this stuff. So once we start making progress with Cloud Init for SLES on Azure, expect some blogs on it, publicly available. So you can go type in your favorite search engine and check out Cloud Init on Azure and what we're doing there.
Yeah. Anybody here leveraging Cloud Init right now as part of their deployment pipeline? Any sort of application configuration, right? Securing systems before they hit the wire, anything like that? Is everybody sleepy and hungry, or?
Maybe hungry.
Hungry, sleepy?
It's getting to lunch.
It's like hangry? We got hangry in here? I see people looking at me.
How many of you guys like building images?
I love building images. Photoshop, I can meme the crap out of anything.
All kinds of images. Images can mean so many things. Let's talk about image customization. So what does it take to build an image? You got to learn a tool. You got to learn maybe Packer. You have to set up some time and learn how to use that. You have to learn how to use Packer to customize whichever OS you might want to build on. So now you have to learn the nuances of an OS, and then you have to learn the nuances of whatever platform you want to deploy the image on. That takes time. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of investment. And customers, what we found customers want, they want a simple way of doing this. They want something that's compliant, right? We've had people ask for CIS hardened images, and they want to build those out and put them in a repository and be able to replicate those across regions. That comes to the image management point. And that's what we're trying to build right now. So we've got a couple different things. We've got the Azure VM Image Builder, and then we've got a thing called the Shared Image Gallery. So the Image Builder will allow you to build these images from a base image. So you can take a marketplace image or an ISO, and you'll spit out a customized image from that. And then you can use the Shared Image Gallery to replicate that image across regions around the world, wherever you want it to, so you can spin up your VMs directly from that. So how does Image Builder work? A few different parts. So like I said, input, you can throw in a SLES ISO, you can throw in a platform image from Azure, and then you'll take it into the customize process. It's all powered by Packer. And then once it's finished customizing, you'll go ahead and distribute it. So you can stick it out as a managed image, you can throw it into the shared image gallery, and it'll all get pushed out to your VMs at some point when you deploy those images to your VMs. And the cool part about this is, once you have your golden images, sometimes you'll need to add extra bits to them. You'll need to add security updates to them. You can just take your output and shove it back in as input, and then recreate another image from that and redistribute that into the gallery. So this is a really cool feature we've got. I can do a super quick demo about it. We've got some code lying around at this link. It's actually very, very quick. Let's do that. So this is the demo. It'll take some time to complete, so I'll kind of show you the high-level steps.
You're not showing.
I'm not showing it. Thank you. Yeah, that might help if I actually showed it.
We're going to tell you guys to imagine a GUI console
Yeah.
with black text, because really, that's all we want to see.
That's all we need is a GUI and text. So here's the link. Here's the page. So you guys saw in the other picture, there's the first step where you take in an image. Well, first, suppose you have to set prereqs and whatnot. So there's all that. Prereqs. We take in an image, so you can see we're curling something here. And what we're doing is, we've got a template lying around here, and this template will point to this. So this is what we want in the image. We want our message of the day to just say, hey, you've been customized, with a happy face. So what I did, and you can literally just copy paste this. It's actually remarkably easy to follow. Copy paste this, copy paste that, start it up, wait 15 minutes. We don't have 15 minutes to wait, so I'll just show you guys the VM I've created. Here we go.
Oh, so it looks like you're running Windows 10? Native Linux shell on a Windows operating system? Who would have thought? Mind blown.
Crazy. Oh, no.
And now our network access. Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Yes. I think everybody's enjoyed the Wi-Fi at the hotel. I love the laughter in the room.
I must have blown something up.
Permission denied. This is how secure it is. If you let your security organization build your images, nobody can get inside it, even you.
That is true. All right. Well, let's can that for now.
It is
remarkably
very much
secure.
Yes.
Well, that is what you would have seen when you logged in. Is a cute little. You've been customized. Anyways, I'm sure you guys have heard about live patching with SLES. There's some slides on that downstairs in the demo booths. And now that we've told you guys all about how great the Azure Tune kernel is for SLES and Azure, here's the reason why you wouldn't want to use the Azure Tune kernel. Live patching requires the standard kernel, which means you'll just have to switch back using Zypper. And it also requires a SLES BYOS image from the marketplace to enable the feature. But it does work, it's supported, and you'll just have to switch back to it. So that's live patching. We thought that was worth bringing up here.
Yes, because we all like uptime. Personally, I want to sleep at night. Well, sometimes I do. Sometimes I'm waiting for that call to tell me something broke because I'm bored. But I think everybody else would rather sleep.
All right, so we get a lot of questions about HA here and there. Customers ask, oh, does it work for SLES? How does it work? Is it supported? Like, what configurations are actually supported? What can I do? I hear things. And there's a lot of levels of HA, right? You're an SAP guy. You can do application level HA. There's OS level HA. There's all kinds of things in between. From an OS level perspective, here's some HA options for you guys. We've got, you can use Pacemaker, a fencing agent, and use Stoneth to fence a failing node. Right now, what that'll do is it'll gracefully try to kill that node. So it'll take a little bit of time, but we're working on a kill switch to make that faster. The other option is using a software watchdog in a shared storage cluster with a witness node and SPD with poison pills to kill off the nodes. So that's the recommended way of doing things.
Exactly.
Yeah, you've seen those SAP.
Yeah, no, we end up with split brain. We end up with bad data. We need that referee that's just going to, headshot right in there and take out the offending node. And as the important part, again, it goes back to innovation, co-development, but anybody can do HA at just a basic infrastructure layer. What we're looking to do is to take HA to the next level where it's cloud aware. We can grab some metadata from the console, and really we're looking at where is this going to go. Like HA as a definition really is going to change, and we're even driving it at hardware levels. And again, let us know where your pain points are, and we staff experts really to help you in this area. So feel free to take advantage of opening support cases or just emailing people so we can get you in touch. And again, it helps us to understand the use cases to broadly understand where we should invest in our next cycles.
So once you have your VM, oh, this is ironic. So we get a lot of support cases for our VMs, and the number one most popular one is I can't SSH to it. What's wrong? I mean, you guys probably just saw the totally planned failure to SSH to the VM.
Totally.
And what you can do, I mean, if you have the computer lying around in front of you, you just plug in the keyboard and you look at it, right? You type in some things and you fix it. But if you're running a VM in the cloud, you can't just run up to an Azure data center and say, hey, can I get to my VM and can I troubleshoot it? That'd be a lot of doors you have to pass through. And that was one of our most number one feature requests for virtual machines was VM console access. So that's what we did. Each VM has a COM1 port among other COM ports, and it sends output to and accepts input from the user through that COM port. And we just take that, we have a process running on the host, and we connect that into the portal, so you can actually have that direct console access to your VM without needing SSH. So that's the beauty of this, is the VM's NIC can be totally shot, it can be completely down, and you can still connect to your VM through the serial console, and that's what I'll show you guys right here. Our lovely message of the day. So here's our console. Yeah, we can see the text. So here's a VM that's not letting me connect. So if I try to SSH to this VM, it's just going to say, connection rejected. Because at this point, the thing's dropped itself into emergency mode. It's sensed that there's something wrong. So we're actually able to log in and have a look and interact with it. So let's do that. And one of our most popular cases that we get is FS tab errors. I'm sure some of the support guys can attest to that. So let's have a look. Oh no, what did I do?
I can't see from over here.
There we go. Check it out. Check out the third entry. What am I doing? I'm mounting something with a UID of 1 at foo. Like that's not right. That'll mess things up. That might be why this is wrong.
Somebody Google coded.
So let's reboot this thing and see what happens. Side note: all this stuff here. Check this out. This is grub. This is grub. You're not going to get this through SSH. You can play around in there. You can play around with your boot configs, change things up. But let's just boot it up. And all this glorious flying text here, you're not going to get that through SSH either. So you can actually see what's going on in your VM as you boot it up. So hopefully that fstab error was the only thing, and this thing will load up and we'll be able to SSH into it. Here we go, starting up SLES. And the other thing about the serial console, it's not just a console, right? We've got other sort of connectivity troubleshooting features for you to use. For example, we've got an ability to send an NMI, a non-maskable interrupt. That'll immediately crash your machine when you send it, so I'll try not to click that because I don't want this to crash. Or you can send a sysrec. So right now we've got some hard-coded here. You can send a sysrec C, you can send a sysrec B, or you can send in a random sequence you want. So if you're familiar with sysrec, you can send in a sysrec sequence, and this will pipe it straight to the VM itself, wherever it's sitting on the host. And I'll shove that in there. It looks like this thing's booted up by now. So here we go. There we go. So this VM's up and running. Let's try SSHing into it. There we go. Oh, I must have messed up my keys, but you know, you'd be able to SSH into that. I think I borked my keys somewhere.
Yeah, I think you did.
I think I did.
So really interesting. So at Coke TCCC, when this was in preview, so we worked with Boris, and I can't tell you how many times we saved ourselves a number of issues, such as like renaming a network interface, which at the time was not really a good thing if you're trying to do it, because our interfaces there's 2 naming objects in the hypervisor. If you rename in a certain way, you can end up with hung VMs. But we had VMs that would randomly deploy and not come up, especially when we're doing Azure migrations, so we're using, well, I guess just any sort of migration tool. And we actually found that going to the console, even though the system wouldn't actually respond, was where we could actually see where we went wrong. And we corrected a number of issues low level. So, and this means that you don't have to rebuild from scratch. You don't have to go through, you don't have to wait for stuff to be piped to syslog. And disk misconfiguration is exceptionally common, or people fat fingering passwords, right? Going to console 0 to reset and a bunch of other things. This is exceptionally useful, and I would say take a look at it, spend some time looking at how you can leverage it, but make sure if you're on Azure, you're running Linux, that this is something you want to be aware of.
That's good stuff. Story time with me.
All right. So I feel like this should be like storytellers on MTV. So we're actually going to step through some practical application. Not just the stuff that we can tell you in this room, but customers that actually have done this at scale, at size, with complex workloads, and how those customers dealt with adversity, both in finding the skeletons in their own closet, leveraging Microsoft resources, how our processes made them successful, but not just that, how we then collaborated with deep level Intel, HPE relationships, Cisco relationships, SUSE and everything. Because when you migrate, you might think that it's just you and the partner, Capgemini, Accenture, anybody else you might use. But really, people get surprised by what we bring to these efforts, and additionally, how deep we go into making sure you're successful. Because no matter what, no matter who's involved, right? In the end, it has a Microsoft logo on it, right? You're talking to a Microsoft person. So if it fails on Azure, we fail, and we don't accept failure. So over here, this is actually, we're going to talk about the SAP use case. I'm going to stand back so this guy over here can take a look because he looks interested. And we look at the industries we're actually in. Now, if you're familiar with any of these industries, each one of them is unique in their approach and what they do, right? So when we look at manufacturing, so agriculture is very different than automotive. When we look at chemical, energy especially is a huge pain in the butt from a security, disconnected networks. I mean, just think about those oil rigs trying to go through satellite. I mean, I've done satellite work. You guys ever try to upload a file over satellite? I tell you, that modem that you had that used to scream, do the whatever, like you would pray for something that fast. Now we look at food and beverage as well, being another area. Pharmaceutical and biotech, right? The controls that are required to hit compliance, both at the application, the infrastructure, from a public cloud perspective. And tell me that all of you have not had the experience where you've actually talked about cloud adoption, where the security guys are going to say like, nah, it's too risky. We can't put our data on there. We can't do this, right? I mean, hopefully you've all had the same experience, because I've had that conversation so many times I've lost count. Now, when we look over here at the top 10 manufacturing modes, we look at discrete, we look at process, mixed, engineering to order, everything else. And these are all huge markets that are starting to show an appetite for actually getting to the cloud. So we've seen a lot of innovation on our part and a lot of innovation from cloud that has actually brought down the barriers to adoption, where the security organization is no longer saying no. Well, actually, they do say no still, but we're able to have a good conversation to say, well, what if I do this, right? Does this help? Like, what if we come and we talk about encryption? What if we talk about this? What if we actually adopt just-in-time security elements and everything else? And so when we look at the modules required at the application level, and keep in mind that even though this is an application-centric problem, that you should never ignore the infrastructure as long as you're going through infrastructure as a service. And really, infrastructure as a service is just a crutch to get to actual cloud-native PaaS, SaaS solutions, right? So really, infrastructure as a service is just pretty much what you got on-prem with some APIs, right? Most of us on-prem probably running VMware. Some of us are getting fancy with KVM and Xen. Really, the public cloud is very, very similar in that sense, except for we're actually offering other services around it that enhance it. So let's go over here. So when we look at SAP and SLES, so first, right, those of us in the room that are familiar with SAP know that 80%, if not more, of SAP instances run on SLES. I mean, I've got Red Hat customers, and oh, don't tell me I said Red Hat. But we've got Red Hat customers that run SAP on SLES, particularly because it's optimized, built, its first development, meaning that when code is built for SAP, it's built, tested on SUSE first, and then of course it's tested on Red Hat as well. But when you're looking at what people are coding on, it's important. So for those of us that write code. And when we look at the old school, so you look at on-prem, bare metal, we look at best of breed like Tivoli and other solutions that you're using to manage your on-prem solution. It's time for those tools to meet the new school, which is hyperscale public clouds. But not just that, to move away from this idea of single points of failure, persistence, and to get to non-persistent structures that are really going to drive cloud adoption and drive the value of cloud, both from a scaling perspective, scale up, scale down, scale out, not just thinking in SAP terms, but just think about resizing a VM, right? And not just that, I mean, can you go from a small 2-core to 206 cores, or go from 56 megs of RAM to 4 terabytes, and in our case, heading up to 6 terabytes of memory and going to 12 in the near future. So all of these things mean that when we look at what we're doing and we're looking at that translation going from on-prem, is that you can shrink in some cases and go more vertical in an easier programmatic way. And in fact, we're going to talk about this. But some of the old school mechanisms that worked on-prem that were really good shortcuts actually come back into view. And IP tables is an interesting one. When we look at both from the firewalling perspective, so you just look at securing your individual box, but then when you look at what IP tables can do from a filtering perspective, from a routing perspective, and other areas, you actually get with some pretty interesting scenarios and interesting solutions that harken back to our old mainframe days, for those of us that are that ancient, as my nieces called me on occasion. And then we look at other solutions that are starting to emerge. Again, old school meets the new school. I mean, Pacemaker's been around for ages. And so is DRDB, Core Sync, and everything else. But when you look at HANA N+N on a public cloud, and you start looking at the way to create high availability from an operating system and tiptoeing into both the resource availability of the cloud and also the resource requirements of the application, you come up with some really interesting use cases where you can get to east and west resiliency, you can create stretch clusters. There's so much more that we can do. And again, we're gonna step through this. Try not to talk too fast. I mean, maybe the sugar-coated donuts got to me, but I get excited about this stuff. So I listed some of the actual customers. And again, the thing I want to go back to is that we are that partner with your businesses that you can actually look and see our impact in your lives today, right? When we talk about Coca-Cola, if you grabbed a Coke, it probably got here because of Microsoft, right? When you look at Daimler Chrysler, right? Your Mercedes-Benz, we look at what we're pulling back. And we got to understand that not only is it great to work with these companies, but because of their size and their reach, they're helping us to drive innovation, to solve new problems, and to really expand where the cloud can go and what it can do. Because we all know that we were all nervous about the cloud being extended into our car. I know I was, particularly because I know how to hack my car. But we look at Rio Tinto, right, from mining and minerals. And then we look at Stryker from a biomedical. And these are all customers that talk about, one, how hard it was to get there. And the cloud should not be hard. In fact, right, weren't we all told the cloud was going to be easy? Like we had that Staples easy button, I'm just going to press it. My landscapes all move to the cloud. It's supposed to be that easy, right? Well, it would be that easy if we'd actually modernized everything on-prem, but all of us know budget constraints, even finding people to do this is difficult. But when you look at, one, the cost savings of adopting a public cloud, and then you look at the resources that Microsoft has, because you're not going to have to go hire that person for a migration cycle, which might be 6 months to a year. And then after that, what do? You put him out to pasture, what are you going to have him do besides that? He's a migration guy. Plus, he's going to get bored anyway. Now, the other thing, too, is we do want to make it easy. Right? We want to make sure that we create an environment where we can share that experience, share code, and make it something where you can Google something, go to Bing, find a template, and get done. And that's really right here. And we'll share out this deck. Just come down. We're going to scan your name. We're going to talk about your firstborn, where you live, social security number, driver's license.
Credit card number?
Yeah, exactly. Credit card number. Yeah. After we take your credit card number and we talk about our psychic network connections, we're actually going to give you the quick start templates. And the quick start templates are what's going to get you going on Azure quickly. Do that rapid prototyping. Get an understanding of how this is going to work. And again, that barrier to entry of, is it going to be faster or slower, or is it going to be a lot more work than I need in order to make my business work? All right. Now, when we talk about our customers, so this might be a small list. It's quaint, it's nice. We got some good names up here. But again, these are the ones that we want to put on the board that you would recognize. Now, if we go through the actual list of Microsoft customers, we could be here for a while, right? And that's great because, again, each one of these industries has taught us something critical. So when we look at retail and food, right? And in fact, we look at Costco, Columbia, right? I see a lot of people wearing Columbia coats while I'm here. We look at manufacturing and mining, and we look at these utility and pharma, and we look at these customers right here. They're actually best of breed, and to see them running on a cloud, none of us would have probably guessed this 5 years ago, much less that they'd be taking a Linux workload or a mixed workload into an Azure public cloud and everything else. And we have some significant advancements with what we're doing with Cosmos DB, Azure Data Lake, and everything else across every one of these guys. Devon Energy is by far my favorite because those guys will, one, come talk about it, but they want to share and they want to innovate, right? And we're doing some really crazy stuff with these guys. Of course, I can't share it. We'd have to kill you. And we love this room so far. Now, recent customers. Again, right, you're seeing some of the same people on here. And again, we need to update this because I'm not sure if all of you know, but recently we won a massive deal. We have a collaboration agreement with Walgreens, right? Who goes to Walgreens here? Anybody? I go to Walgreens. I got a kid. He's 6. Gets sick all the time at school. I have to go get meds in the middle of the night. Walgreens is great. Well, now I feel better knowing that we're involved. We're going to take them to the next level. We're going to sort out some new acquisitions and everything else that they have coming down the pipe. But they're simply just massive, and you would not expect it. And it's going to be great to start to partner and collaborate with them in this space. Now, again, hitting on security, right? Because the security conversation, we're all tech people in this room. I doubt, is there any security people here? Okay, because I'm going to tell them they have to leave. But at the same time, right, we want to make sure that when you go to your security organization that we're your partner to help you, right? So if your security organization is asking you about compliance, because all of us have sat through audits, delivered artifacts, had to dump logs and everything else, but really Microsoft wants to take things again and make it simpler. So we have security templates. We actually have a security organization. If you're an Azure customer, we have EAs and everything else. We can actually come in, we'll partner with you, and we'll help you in that conversation with the things and the aspects in that security discussion that help to clarify where the industry is at, where compliances are going, and also interrelated compliances that you might not be aware of how they're going to impact you. For instance, Brexit is probably going to affect everybody in this room, maybe not just from a security perspective, from a number of other perspectives. But of course, we're keeping very close watch on it, even though they can't figure out what they're going to do. All right, so I could go through all of these. You guys get an idea. This is actually a short slide. We actually have more than this, but it's all I could fit where you could still possibly read most of it. All right, and the case study. And I was actually joking with Alfred here that most of the pictures that you see of me is of my back, because most of the time I'm drawing out diagrams. And it's really interesting. So if you take a look at what this looks like here, and what it actually translated to in the end, we talked about a little bit over 9-month migration cycle that was a brawl. I mean, it was a bar brawl across everything. Telcos, network providers, AT&T, I mean, just really the breadth of everything we had to do. And again, we had to come out of our own Azure data centers, and we had to look at how do we make you successful from on-prem, right? We had to invest to make sure that we understood what is the path from on-prem into the cloud. What are the streets that you've built? Are those streets fast enough? And in some cases, they weren't. So let's get an idea of what is going on. So Kona was located in one of our, not our Microsoft, but one of the industry's largest co-locations facilities. And they had a significant investment in that facility. They owned the hardware, they owned licenses, they had bought into the monitoring and everything, and they hadn't really gathered a full scope of what it meant to get out of those data centers. And their motivation was they were coming up on refresh. Do I buy hardware? I mean, we all buy hardware. Sometimes we lease it, right? But when you do, it's a sunk cost, right? Now, when you're looking at the pros and cons of do I buy new hardware or do I go to a public cloud, right? What are the options there? When you evaluate cloud, it's mostly been a VM evaluation, right? I mean, for years, right? Nobody offered bare metal in a cloud. I mean, there's some API-driven stuff. I've built some of the stuff around this. But when you look at hyperscale, I mean, really, there wasn't any game in town. And then 2-3 years ago, some radical individuals inside of Microsoft said, you know what? Nothing says that the cloud can't include bare metal. Right? Why don't we do something with bare metal and actually bring some real differentiator? And now we got people nipping at our heels, but we've been doing this for 3 years now with bare metal. Now, when Coke came to evaluate, they were, of course, looking at, well, they want better service, they want it cheaper. They were looking at all the colo, edge sites facilities, so, SuperNAP, all the names that you guys know. But when we threw in Azure and they came over and they said, well, we have existing agreements, we have existing technology investments, really, this could be something very interesting, but it's bare metal. You guys don't do bare metal. We do bare metal. Tell me what you need. So we started looking at what would be a 7-month project that was not 7 months with Capgemini. And it was very interesting, right? And it was a SAP BW HANA migration. It was initially a 5-in-1, so it's 5 2-terabyte nodes. It was 8 terabytes to start, stretch cluster. So 8 terabytes of memory stretched across instances. Now, we're not even going to talk about backup, RTO, RPO, everything else, right? But it was HANA initially, and then they said, well, if we move it, we can't leave everything else there because the latency is too bad. So now we got to do more. So that 7 months grew, because we all know scope creep, right? Anybody ever planned a project where it was exactly what you planned? I've yet to have that happen, right? It's always more, and you always find some developer that hard-coded an IP address, and you don't know until you migrate, and you're like, that hurt. So let's take a look at this. Where do we go, right? We had to actually go in and reorganize the teams. Microsoft dropped in people, reorganized Capgemini. We actually brought our engineering team. I mean, Boris might be having a little bit of trauma back there from the various things that I asked him over time. And we actually organized both the Kona teams themselves, as well as ourselves. And we were challenged. And it's a great use case, great story, great video on this. So they had 9 different landscapes, right? Typical landscapes are 5. Imagine if you have 9 different landscapes to move that are bringing tech debt with them, right? Because all of us know that there's been an opportunity to patch things in SAP that we have avoided because we just really want to sleep and not have a break on us, right? And we look at what we've got, 32 HANA large instances, right? That's 32 4 terabyte boxes, right? Let's just talk monitoring, like just in your mind, equate that, authentication, host names, DNS entries, and that's just, table stakes for us, right? Because that's not everything else. We look at the production where we landed was 8 plus 1. So we're 5 plus 1. While we're moving, they were growing so fast, we had to actually scale out to 8 nodes with a standby, right? DR had to be 100% a match to production, right? Something they had not done before. So before, DR for them was really light, like everybody in here. When you think DR, something small, right? You flip the switch when something goes bad, and then you grow it out, and build it out as fast as possible because nobody wants to pay to keep it online. Well, the cloud's a good bit different, right? Because you can actually mix and say, well, I can actually build DR for the databases, but my applications with ASR can actually spin up fast, meaning I don't have to have them turned on because ASR is keeping the state. And if something goes wrong, the Azure Site Recovery tool can actually recover the application servers, and we have the DB state preserved. But again, this is where we're mixing 2 different types of tools fundamentally to understand how to make a financially viable solution work for something that's just quite massive, right? And then we look at multi-tiered replication systems and everything else of how we had to get to 17 terabytes of scale-out data on an SAP environment. I mean, the numbers are impressive. We've actually got bigger stuff that we're working on, right? This is the one that we're talking about because it's big, but we've got bigger. And we had to do site A to B to C. So if you're an SAP person, right, you have a 3-leg replication limit with HSR. Anybody here running SAP? 1, 2, 3, all right, 4, all right. We've just seen the hands go up. You guys look like you're not confident. I'm just saying. But when you're looking at these migration scenarios, so if you've got site A, which is your production facility, you've got site B, which is then your standby replica or anything else, and you got site C, right? You come up with an interesting problem because A needs to remain where it is. But then you need to spin up what you've got in Azure, and you also need DR. But you end up with a unique problem because Azure needs a DR, and you can't use the old one. So you need a 4th leg, and SAP does not offer that at the moment. So we actually did some pretty unique work on this using CephFS and Ceph file systems to actually bring backups into line within a day and a half after cutover because we didn't want them to fly without a net. I mean, who wants to migrate their production environment into a public cloud and go a week without DR? Anybody? Any takers? Right? No? Okay, I'm just wondering. I personally, that's not the way I went. And there's a good quote down here from Corey Sanders, who was instrumental from a leadership perspective. And just to understand where we are with bringing our investment, right? We feel like a flat organization. We're going to bring executives, anybody that gets the ball running, if it's going to contribute to your success, right? Microsoft is all in on making you successful, all the way up there. And actually, we can kind of see, right, the growth. And this is a good plot here. Right, so we started with 6 plus 1 in April, 7 plus 1, 8 plus 1, 9 plus 1, 10 plus 1, 11 plus 1, right? The system is just growing. And again, this is at the 4 terabyte note. You guys have to understand, we're going beyond this. 4 terabytes used to be big. Now we're talking 12 terabyte, 24 terabytes, right? And you can get it at Azure. Nobody else is doing that in a public cloud. Nobody's hitting those sizes. Right? And again, you want to talk about it, come see us. We'd love to talk to you about, right, the operating system, because we all know operating system didn't support more than 20 terabytes about a year ago. These are important things to factor into when you're looking at consolidation of your environment to actually get to a financial model that's actually going to work for you in the cloud, right? Is scale going to be good, right? And does that adversely affect what you store or what you manage from your tooling? Or is it going to be good to actually get bigger, go smaller? Or do you just want to manage that 50% of the year? I want to be dense vertical. The other 50% makes sense to be horizontal. I mean, these are things that we can do in the cloud, in Azure, programmatically and predictively. Now, when we take a look at what we had to do, so Azure starts right there, right? But when we take a look at everything else, and granted, we made this very, very brief, right? So this is lines of business. So when you have a large enterprise, you might have a corporate office, but you might have independent lines of business with their own infrastructure, their own support groups, and everything else. There's 18 bottlers here that don't agree on how to manage things, much less did they actually agree on IP addresses? No. So we got to enjoy the fun goal of trying to manage overlapping RFC 1918. And if you're a network geek, you get what I'm saying. Not just that, but all the circuits in their MPLS network were 10 meg or smaller at AT&T. So imagine these guys, and this is a good map, right? Start here, go through AT&T, then you have your major DCs, and then you got to go up through level 3, and then you go to Express Route, and then, right? It's a long way to go from here all the way to over there. And we spent a lot of time looking at not just what it took to move the application, but who's accessing from where? And this becomes a data gravity and a network access exercise when you start looking at, right, where are your bottlenecks? And we had bottlenecks all over the place. So when we look at the SDC, these are the landscapes over here. ETC, this is where production landed as well. Then we had their backup facility in Las Vegas and San Francisco. All of these had to move and be replicated in a way to land over on this side, which is where it was all nice, easy peasy. So we have the East data center, we have the West data centers, and we look at what landed over here. And I started trying to list this out. And honestly, guys, it gets pretty massive. Now, if you want to get an idea of actually what it looks like, roughly, just from the one piece, this is what it looked like. And this is just the SAP pieces, right? Now, you don't just move SAP by itself. SAP needs time. SAP needs DNS. You need flat files. You need monitoring, right? Let's just keep going down the list, the operations guys, of what they need to do. And we don't want it to go back across those pipes to a DC, because if there's a problem with MPLS, like, and none of us here have ever had problems with MPLS. MPLS always works, right? You never end up with a broadcast issue or layer 2 adjacency problem, which, by the way, we ran into as well. Right? When we start looking at all these systems, this is what they had and this is what they needed to move. And I tried putting storage on here, but again, it got too crowded. So I'm just going to give you, these are the servers and the systems that had to move. Now, the great thing is, as we started to get over to Azure, we could consolidate, right? Because we could make things bigger. We could make things smaller. We could scale up. We could scale down. You now had access to blob storage. You didn't have to worry about a big EMC sitting around or SAN and snapshots and how do you manage all this. No. It's all cloud, all programmatic and everything else. So we see these red boxes as nodes that started to drop, right? We got rid of a file server because we could go to Azure Files, a fully cloud native service, right? You got a file share server. Anybody ever had to do patches on a file share server? Right? You ever had like some customer say like, look, I need my Excel file. You can't take down the file share server. And then some executive comes over and says, yeah, no, you're going to have to scrub it. Sorry. Right? But imagine if it's a PaaS server, you don't have to patch it anymore. It's just there. Right? And it's buffered and it's cached. Not just that. It used to be, well, how do I get that file if I need to or if I should from home? Oh, VPN, still got to go through all that, right? You know, we all deal with that as well. But what if you could just go over to Azure Storage and you just grab it, right? Use Intune, you can have policy arrangements, Azure Active Directory providing you security. That box is the first cloudified solution that they went to that we could say is a cloud native solution. And then we start looking at all the other pieces, right? BODs, we're able to go through the Tableau systems, we're able to be consolidated as well. And then we started looking at, well, as we started to collapse things, we were able to add things where they had not been able to. So, right, we all know that as we go through our dev environments, right, there's always a numbers crunch, right? Do we make dev big? Do we make QA big? Like, maybe we'll just shrink it down and we just don't want to spend the money. But if you could actually dynamically add an instance into the environments when you need it, when it was critical, and then shut it down, it becomes very, very easy. And this is where we see the value of the cloud. And now we start looking at TBD. Now, I added this because it's almost anecdotal, because they had a whole plan around all of this other stuff down here, and it still didn't manifest when we moved. But we have a lot of TBD stuff that you can now actually make and bring to fruition with a cloud migration. So, and actually, I haven't asked anybody. Anybody have any questions? Because this is a lot. No? No? All right. I think I'm standing between you guys and food. Let me see, what time is it? All right, I don't want to, I see a lot of head nodding. All right, so we'll go through this quickly, right? So if we look at the inventory over here, and we look at the diagram, the workflow, so ETC is their existing data center. And again, after we migrated, we didn't just shut it down, because nobody in their right mind is going to shut down their legacy production facility until it's been running in the new facility. But we're able then to create other integration points that actually then made it easier to keep the SAP transaction workflow, to keep the legacy environment up to date as a fallback in a very efficient way. And then if we look at the rest of the load balancer, the jump boxes, where sandbox development, and everything else, again, it's a lot to put into a slide, and I could talk about this for hours, but we don't have the time. So if you want to go through this, though, in a bit more detail, and we could talk about storage problems, right, replication issues, all the other things that takes to actually make something this size run in a cloud, we're downstairs, love to talk to you about it. And we'll love to show you guys where we're going with our new instances, how it's going to work, and the certifications that are required that we actually are achieving in Azure itself. That's it.